Welcome to the Estates Made Simple podcast with Jenna Carbello and Gordon Vanderleek. We are on a mission to simplify the world of estate administration, helping executors gain the knowledge required to manage an estate. Please note, the following is for informational purposes only and is not to be considered legal, tax, or financial advice. We recommend you seek individualized advice for your unique situation with qualified professionals.
Welcome to another episode of Estates Made Simple. Today is a very special episode. We have a lovely guest on today, 2 times tech founder and CEO of MyTrusty.ai, Randy Frisch. Welcome, Randy.
Thanks, Jenna. Thanks, Gord. I'm really excited to be here on a podcast again. It's been a bit for me, but in a new space and really excited.
Randy, why don't you start off with telling us all about MyTrusty.ai, what it does, how you started it. Tell us your story.
Yeah, sounds great. So I really stumbled into this space of estate planning. I'm enjoying just being on these conversations, as I told you both earlier, because I feel like I'm learning from the two of you as I try and understand the estate space. But I think what's relatable about Trusty and the app that we've built is it's solving a problem that pretty much everyone can relate to. And that's this idea of if something were to happen to me, who's going to get my most important things? And I'm not talking about the things that the will cover. I'm talking about where the will ends and there's gaps. I know that your YouTube channel and coverage is growing, as Gord told me. So not everyone's going to see the video here, but even if you look at my frame behind me, this piece of art was my wife's grandmother's art that was passed down to us. And this green chair was my grandfather's chair. And both of these items got to us, but it wasn't always clear who would get what. And I kind of stumbled into this space, as I said, because after I alluded, Jenna, I had a tech venture before this in another space. I sold it. And the day I sold it, I had this romantic gesture in mind, which was I was going to buy my wife a gift on the way home from exiting the business to say thank you. And I stopped. I bought her a nice bracelet. I came home with that document that you get when you buy something nice, like an engagement ring or a bracelet like that. I threw it in a drawer right beside me here and I saw a whole bunch of pile of really important documents. And I thought to myself, none of this stuff is referred to in the will. It's just stuff that for good reason that probably the two of you could explain to listeners better. We don't want to put some of our personal valuables into a will. And as a result, we're left unsure where to list those things and sometimes creating what's known as this letter of wishes.
And maybe that's where Gordon can step in and share with our listeners what a letter of wishes is.
Yeah, I was going to jump in on that. Thanks for that, Jenna. Because, okay, here's the reality is I love what you're doing and getting in this space because most wills I draft, and I think this is typical for a lot of lawyers, we might have a personal belongings clause. I think you've already identified with, you're not dealing with the hard assets like at the house and the RRSP and things like that, but there's a whole lot of value attached to personal belongings, right? If you look at that, it, for example, can include automobiles. Our definition of personal belongings in the will says it's all the stuff in your house. Like, as you've already alluded to, the chair and the picture, right? That those aren't in your will, but they are items of sentimental value. And you might very well have a very specific wish about what happens to those items on your demise. And that knowledge, if it's between your ears, goes with you when you become incapacitated or you pass away, right? That's the problem in a nutshell. But with regard to the wills, we often have a clause in the will that says, "Dear executor," I'm paraphrasing here, "Dear executor, please distribute these personal belongings in accordance with any verbal or written instructions I may have left in my lifetime." So in other words, I say to the client on the planning side, if you really want that painting to go somewhere, you say, "Gord, I want you to have that painting." You better have a clause in the, "I hereby bequeath that painting to Gordon," right? Then it happens. The executor will follow that instruction. But for the most part, all these items, which have a lot of sentimental value and maybe actual value, because it couldn't be like an expensive automobile. What happens with that? At the end, the law would say it's at the discretion of the executor or the administrator to make those decisions. I think most executors go, well, in this case, we'll pretend you're gone, Randy. What would Randy have wanted with that painting or that chair? And in that case, they're left with this conundrum of going, the law doesn't give me any answers. My estate lawyer's not telling me what to do. And so it's throwing it back to me saying, you have to decide. It's how do I decide? And you may have a whole bunch of people as part of the estate who happen to have an opinion of what Randy wanted. Oh no, he always promised it to me. Or I think this is not fair. So the executor is in that difficult spot of wanting to do the right thing, not wanting to get sued or to start a family feud. And I think wanting to honor a deceased person's wishes, fundamentally, they go, of course, I'd want to do what they wanted me to do. What if they didn't say anything? I'm always encouraging clients after they do the will saying, put together some memorandum, put a letter of wishes or write a dear executor letter. And it's probably helpful to have it in writing because then there's no confusion about what you intended. And that would be extremely helpful for the executor. So with that being said, it seems to me that's the background I think you're filling, which is wonderful because literally 98% of the wills I draft keep it open-ended for a reason, because every time somebody decided what to do, you might change your mind with regard to that painting and say, I'm not going to give it to Gord. I want to give it to Jenna. You'd have to go make an appointment with the lawyer, redo the will, end up with an invoice for that legal work. You're not going to do that, right? That's not practical. People are not going to do that. Every time you change your mind, you're going to go see your lawyer. That's not practicable. But is there a way, and this sounds like the problem you're trying to solve, so maybe you can react to this, I guess, my little soliloquy here of read the background, but I'm excited because this is the space you're filling. And there really is, other than people just putting fingers to keyboard or pen to paper and writing out what is between their ears, right? There is no other way of doing it. And certainly that doesn't contemplate support documents, which could also be really important from an accounting perspective. What's the cost base of this item? Is there a tax consequence to the disposition of this more expensive asset? Well, there's different rules in the Income Tax Act, which we're not going to get into here, with regard to certain items that you might own. So it could be a thorny issue for executors. But I think this is a good space to be in because most executors have to wrestle down this issue.
I think you recapped so many of the issues that I've run into since, as I said, I stumbled into this as essentially the user or the consumer who's living through these moments. And one more real situation that I ran into shortly after stumbling into this idea and starting to build an original product, I actually had a loss in my family, being my grandmother. Yeah, she lived an amazing life to 104. And this was in the last year or so. The will was very tight, well done. There were letters of wishes, but she was years old. There were multiple letters of wishes and they conflicted. And on top of those letters of wishes, like you said, Gord, there was other conversations that happened at different points of life that we all wanted to honor her wishes, as you said, but it wasn't super clear what they actually were. And we're still dealing with this in some ways. And I think what we're trying to do, as you said, is number one, make the job of the executor easier. Because I was speaking to someone at a large trust organization, and they told me a similar story where the will actually said the art categorically should be divided amongst the 3 kids and let the kids figure it out. Now, the art was worth, in this case, tens of millions of dollars. All the kids wanted just one piece, which was the piece in the dining room where they ate dinner every Sunday night. All the other pieces, they were like, you can have it, you can have it. And the executor couldn't settle the estate in its completion until they determined who would get this asset and who would get the other asset. So having that clarity beyond a piece of paper that's very down to the asset can be really important. And so what we've done with Trusty is, first of all, the process of doing this can be overwhelming. People continue to accumulate more and more personal valuables over time. So the first thing we do, make it really simple. There's some amazing things that you can do today with AI. We're building with some of the most trusted technologies in the world, including Google's technologies such as Gemini. So if you take a photo of something in your house, whether it's a piece of art, whether it's a piece of jewelry, a collector car, we'll extract all that information just from the photo itself to help you detail this asset. The second thing we do is we let you create contacts such as heirs or beneficiaries who should inherit those things. But what we wanted to do was make it even more real and more heartfelt than just a piece of paper, right? Pieces of paper, sometimes, as we always say, when you write something down, you lose the intention. So what we've built in is the ability to actually upload a video wish explaining why that person's inheriting that coveted piece that was in the dining room every Sunday night. Maybe it's that kid's expected to now host dinner every Sunday night going forward, right? So it's that ability to bring these memories into the next generation, remove, as you said, Gord, like some of that family strife and make everyone's job easier and really lean into this intent that's there in the first place.
What I love about what you're saying, and maybe with Jenna's permission, a quick little story, because I think it sets up what you're doing. I was involved in an estate. There were 6 kids and very different opinion about how to divide everything up, right? Because you got even more than a basketball team there trying to figure out 6 people, probably 6 different opinions about who's supposed to get what. It turned out when I had the meeting with the client and said, really put your wishes down, right? So he did. He had a 6-page memorandum of here's what everybody gets, right? And so the family all gathered, and you could tell there was a fight brewing. People were grumbling and whispering, and they all got together after the funeral, and he just handed out copies of that 6-page memorandum. There wasn't a fight. Everybody goes,
Right.
oh, so now suddenly their personal opinion got supplanted by Dad's opinion. No argument, no fighting. Dad was actually worried a little bit about, are the kids going to fight about stuff? Because they didn't all get along in life. And so it was a real illustration for me that if people actually go to the effort of documenting their wishes, that governs. Like, who's going to fight what Dad wanted?
Absolutely.
So that is a very analog way of solving the problem. And you have now come up and provided a digital solution. So I guess if somebody still wants to type out a 6-page letter of wishes, they could do it. And I just given an example, only one example of where that was very helpful for the family, and the executor had no fighting on his hands to sort out with regard to that, because he just followed the wishes.
So I
But
think
this is that much more powerful. And it really allows, I think, what I hear you saying is, and then you can expand on it further, is we've got supporting documentation about, okay, maybe even here's the purchase contract, or here's the valuation, or maybe AI can tell you what it's worth. If an executor have to sell it, I mean, there's going to be some important tools in there that would be wonderful for the role of the executor. But even the video wishes, how powerful in terms of just saying, this is what I want. Looking at it as a lawyer that deals with people who are in dispute sometimes, who's going to fight that? An executor is going to go, I'm following the video. Anybody want to challenge me? I'm going to imagine there's no response to that other than, I guess that's what we got to do. I love that. That's perfect. It's an enhanced version. It's obviously doing much more than a 6-page written document is going to do, and additional tools for somebody to take control of what is very valuable. And supporting what you say is there could be big dollars attached to some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Like $10 million worth of art. That's worth having some direction, because that for sure could end up as people lawyering up and fighting about that stuff.
I was at an event recently, Gord, and a guy I casually know was wearing a really cool watch. I'm not a watch guy, but because I'm doing this app and I know a lot of people have been uploading watches into it, I said, yeah, it's a really interesting piece. And without even talking about the space that I'm in, he said, my dad left this for me and I wear it to any event I go to. And then beyond there, I said to him, that's so nice. I said, what's the story behind the watch? And he said, I know nothing beyond the fact that he wanted me to have it. Right. So I wear it because of that. And I thought, what if that video that we now have in here could tell not just the intention, but the story behind it too? And those are the beautiful things that I'm really excited about that we've managed to bring with technology. But to your point, there's also a lot of very logistical things that we're checkboxing too. So to your point, we make it really easy to upload the documentation for that purchase that you have. If anyone's watching this show, Friends and Neighbors with John Hamm, it's great. But all these items get stolen from the house. Just having the documentation in the event of loss is important, let alone transfer as it is. We allow you to, as you said, update the valuation with time. So you understand the original cost base as well as what that item is at the time, which depending on asset class can play a role in probate, of course. So there's a lot of things that become really important that even if you threw it in a letter of wishes, what we're trying to also bring is just that hygiene to the process, including the fact that, I don't know, the two you probably know, Jenna, like what's the most frequent that someone updates their will?
That's a great question. People don't update it as frequently as they should, but I've probably seen as frequent as once a year.
What I typically advise on the planning side would be think about the next 3 to 5 years when you're trying to make decisions about what should be in your will. And because that's oftentimes the range where people will come back. I say 3 to 5 to shorten the time horizon to make it easier to make a decision, but typically 5 to 7. Maybe there's been enough change in their life or to the lives of the people who are named in the document that a change is required. So you might say That 5 to 7 is pretty typical, that they might be coming back to make some changes. I had one the other day. It was 12 years ago that they
Right.
did their will. So it is varies, but with changes in the tax laws and changes in family circumstances and changes in their net worth, both up and down, that it usually requires saying, hey, we should do some updates. I would say around that 3 to 5 to 7 year mark is pretty typical in my
So
practice. So
if
people
you
will be coming back.
contrast that 3 to 5 years with, let's just call it a good spouse who buys gifts on Valentine's Day and Christmas and the anniversary and the birthday, there's a good chance that at least one time of year, if not more, you're buying a personal valuable that at some point is going to become an heirloom, that's sometimes going to become that picture on the wall behind me or the chair behind me that's going to be part of the family for generations to come. It becomes overly complex and almost daunting to revisit that every 3 to 5 years versus have a way that you can just snap a picture, which is what we've done, and upload that and have that sit there for not just your executor, but for your whole family. And that's just a part of what Trusty does. We're also doing some really interesting things as we transition into the will itself to make sure that we can remind you when it's been 3 years and it's time to approach Gord and his team or Jenna and her team to look at your will again and make sure that there's no tax implications. And we're doing that with cool ways where we upload your estate documentation, your wills or power of attorney documents, whatever it might be. And we've got a built-in AI agent of sort who can look through these things and let you know when things are aging and when it may be worth going beyond AI to get an advisor back involved.
That's perfect.
And so take us through the steps. Let's go back to the example of your wife's beautiful bracelet that you purchased for her. And so you're sitting there with the documents, you upload it into the app, you take a picture, you designate who you want to receive it upon the passing of you and your wife. And then you might update it as time goes on. But once you pass away, what is the executor really doing to extract that information? And logistically, what takes place at that time?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the things that was really important for us and how we thought about this app is ensuring, I'm going to first answer a question around data, right? It's really important that this data is both secure and only accessed by the right people at the right time, right? People have different views of passing on valuables, whether that's an explanation of their will and their intentions or these really personal assets. So what we've done is we've built permissioning for when you invite people in, when do they get access? Are they getting access today because maybe they're your spouse and the two of you should be able to upload things and plan together? Or are you adding one of your children and you want them to have that same visibility today, which I think is a newer wave of the next generation and the openness that's happening? Or are you more traditional, maybe like my parents who like, I don't know what is coming to me and what's not coming to me. But one day I'll get the will and I'll get this package and I'll be able to understand those intentions. So we built that functionality to allow people in at the right time. And one of those user types that we've created is an executor. Our recommended, if you will, access is that person gets control upon your passing. So one of the things that we arm you with is language to pass to one of your two teams, Jenna's team or Gord's team, that can be injected into the will. And I'll let the two of you correct me if this is off in any way, but most wills, like Gord said earlier, will allude to this letter. They'll say, from time to time, I keep a letter. It may even say I keep it in my desk or I keep it in the safe down at the bank or wherever it is. Please treat that as my intention and my wishes, and please follow them should something happen to me beyond the will. Now, the will always take precedent over that. But for all these items that aren't mentioned in the will, that letter becomes binding. We're just injecting this paragraph that says, from time to time, I upload an app called Trusty. Please refer to that. Here's who has access. Please reach out to them. That person who I told you is the executor will have a unique secure code. Only they will be able to access it from their email, and they'll need that to redeem upon your passing, including proof of death certificate and their own identification verification.
It's nice to have those safeguards in place, right? And to be able to share where required, because there's a lot of stuff that's there. So even just having an app, it may even seem overwhelming to do it all in the beginning. But if you just said, okay, over the course of a year, every month, we're going to take an hour on a Saturday morning and just upload some stuff. And then once it's all uploaded, we can actually then have a conversation about what our wishes might be and then make it very easy to change. I think that's brilliant in terms of having a way to encourage that particular conversation. I'm reminded of the fact that from time to time I've drafted wills that also say, if any child of mine has gifted me something, I want those items to go back to that kid. It's not all the time, but that could be a thing, right? If that's the wish of a parent, a very clear way in which you can document their knowledge, which they know who gave them what. The parent will remember that and they could put it right in the app. Then that is like the dispute resolution mechanism to resolve any of those issues. If that's, for example, the wish saying, if you gifted it to me, you get it back, and dividing things up and everything else, follow my wishes, or dear executor, sort it out, right? With regard to that, or having those sort of communications in there can be really helpful and provide ultimately, I think, some peace of mind to the person putting the stuff into trustee that their wishes are going to be carried out, is because that's the whole point of estate planning. You have a plan, you have wishes, and when you're gone, the legal documents carry out those wishes. So this is a nice sort of adjunct tool to carry out those wishes.
Yeah, Gord, I think you said it well. And listen, we are still a young and evolving Canadian startup. And the mission or vision that we've set is to be the trusted way to share your wishes. That's our simple way that's guiding us internally. And I think that can actually be really hard today. As much as we have ways to communicate, communication gets lost when it's not centralized and we don't have one true place to look, because we have our emails and we have our iMessages and our WhatsApp chats and all sorts of different things. What we want to really do is help people centralize this for real clarity at these tough moments, because there's a lot of emotion at a time of loss. And I believe that there's actually really good intent for those moments, and it can be a beautiful time. And that's what we're trying to lean into. I think with all the preparation that goes into this by experts like yourselves and the intentions of families, it's sometimes these most treasured small things that just don't make it into the will that we're actually able to solve for. And I gave the two of you a peek of where we're going from a product roadmap before we did this recording, and not to overly tease our future, but we want to make it easier and easier to communicate, right? To share those wishes through really simple messaging inside the app. Whether I want to do that with my kids and notify them today, whether they turn a certain age, or should something happen to me, I should be in control of that. And they should be able to get that without having to search through a drawer or folder that they may never find.
And I think even going through this, there's just a lot of benefit of even going through the process of documenting what is it that you own and uploading those important documents. You also had mentioned, I think earlier, that you have the ability to upload the actual documents, not maybe the ownership, the important original documents regarding maybe valuations or insurance coverage, or the actual bill of sale for the bracelet, for example. You would have got something from the jeweler on the way back from the buyout to the closing meeting for that you were involved with. There's a good place to put those things, but also the legal documents themselves. So that's interesting from my perspective as an estate planning lawyer to say it could be another place where a copy is kept. Obviously, the lawyer keeps a copy, but we do run into situations where people go, I don't know where the will is, right? Or they have a hard time finding it. So at least having a copy is better. You need the original. So the original should be kept in a safe place, but a copy is the next best alternative. So speak a little bit to that. Am I correct to understand that
Yeah.
it's a place that you could upload those important documents as well?
So that, I'll tell you first of all how that came to be, because we didn't plan on building that originally. And it was talking to a combination of families and their advisors, where we learned like one of the most common problems is what you just said, is like finding that will in a moment of need. And that moment of need can be upon death, but it can also be upon the moment where you're about to go on a vacation and you're like, oh my God, we're leaving the kids back and I don't even know who gets them anymore. If something were to, God forbid, happen to us, and people are sitting there in fear, and do I have to call my lawyer and see if it's still the right person? So all these things were coming up, and we realized that this mission that we have of a trusted way to share your wishes should also be your comfort in that moment of being able to find these things, and eventually someone else. So we made it really easy to upload all of these related estate documents, your wills, your power of attorney, whatever, even life insurance policies, if you choose to do. And we've made it really easy, partly due to technology that's out there today. We're using AI to bring that in and also make it easy to understand. So we create I don't want to overwhelm people. I'll call it an AI summary, but it's really just a layman summary of your will, because the average will can be 20 to 50 pages, and it can be really hard to even skim and understand the goals. Beyond that, we've even built in the ability, you can literally type a question. You could write, who gets the kids if something were to happen to us? It'll give you that answer. And as I said, where we're trying to go from here longer term is that when you get an answer you don't like, that you can then connect with your advisory team, your executor, your estate planner, your lawyer, and start to talk about making those changes rather than waiting, as you said, Gord, 3 to 5 years, or Jen, I think you said sometimes it's even more, that people wait until there's a life-changing moment, not realizing that some of these things change for us. When my wife and I redid our will, which was just in the last couple of years when I sold my last business, we looked back on our will and it felt stupid. Like we were like, what decisions were we making? And we only made that change because of one moment, but there were so many other implications that had changed around us. And so those are the things that we're excited about, being able to use the documents to better understand those global wishes that you have. Originally, back to not intending to do this, we just thought it would be a nice utility to have it on hand. But we're starting to realize that there's a lot of things that we can help you better understand in terms of your plan.
Randy, I think this is fantastic. And as you're speaking, I'm thinking of so many different scenarios that your service can apply to. One in particular is blended families, where you have kids from prior relationships, and then two families get together, they share a home, they have personal items from their own history, and then one of them passes away, and then you have the kids wondering which item belonged to mom, which item belonged to my stepfather, and vice versa. And that in particular, I think, is a huge problem that you're solving. And I'm really excited to see where this goes and how you can help so many different families.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's so true. And I appreciate you highlighting that. One of the things that I think about is if we were to timeline anyone's life from a wealth perspective, you could argue that wealth generation can start much earlier than your first job, but it really starts to form when you buy property, right? When you buy property, you start to fill it in with things that have value and have these memories that we're talking about. And then obviously the somewhat official end is your death. But as you hit on, Jenna, all these various life moments where there is wealth transition, something that's planned or something that's intended or something that's forced, such as divorce situations, such as empty nesting, downsizing of homes. And we really want to try and build for all of those. Obviously, we want to be there in the most dire moments, a loss, and make that easier. But a lot of those situations that you're talking about can, I think to Gord's earlier point, in absence of clarity, you can have conflict. And with these really clear wishes, I think people just seem to buy in.
That's wonderful. Randy, I think there's even more we can get into as far as the backstory and all this, but I think we've touched on a number of scenarios where this could be actually quite valuable and a good service. And obviously you've had some uptake already with success with the app. So I'm going to also close by saying, I wish you more of that success. And I'm hoping our listeners might give the app a try. I know after this episode, I'm going to download it. You've intrigued me, and I think this is going to be a good tool. I also like the fact that I'm hearing this as a tool that's going to encourage people to go to advisors, right? I don't think this is anything that's going to replace what a lawyer can do, or an estate planner, or an accountant, or a financial planner, but it's going to trigger when people need to talk to those advisors. So it's educating them, which we're all trying to do, right? Is educate our clientele and encourage them when to make changes at appropriate points in life. And it starts with at least having the information, and it starts with having the knowledge of, oh, yeah, maybe I need to change my guardian clause because I didn't realize that we had this sibling who was going to look after our kids. We want to make some changes, or that's not appropriate anymore, or just some of those AI features building in. I think that's using AI in a productive way, and just really encourage you on that. And we can maybe think of even some future features. It sounds like, I guess, in closing, that this is not a static product and it's fully baked, if you will. It's evolving. You strike me as the consummate entrepreneur that goes, I want to make it better. And there's going to be another version and more improvement. And you're listening to people in the field, and you're listening to your audience and trying to make things better. So I'm encouraged by that, because I think I could think of more things that this could even do, and would encourage you that. But a great start. It looks like a good quality app. and really want to encourage our listeners on that. Maybe as we wrap up, if people want to learn more about the app, maybe direct to the website, other places they can go to get more information.
Yeah, so you hit on a lot of, first of all, thank you for just leaning in, and the two of you, and Jenna for reaching out in the first place. And the two of you have been helping me learn. So to your point, Gord, we're so early in what we're building. We've built a lot of really great product, and we've got more feedback coming in. In terms of how we think about this product, there's two ways that you can get the product. One is go to the App Store, whether you're on an iOS device, an Apple device, or an Android device on the Google Play Store. You can download it and give it a try for free. And then there's a point where you can purchase the app on an ongoing basis. But more commonly, the way we expect people to get this is from their advisors. And we have built some extensive product for the advisor themselves in terms of the communication tools. More of that, as you said, is still being developed and is going to come and enrich that. And my belief of AI, and AI used well, if you will, is when it helps you realize the next task that you should do. I think that for the type of client that we're trying to solve for, it's a more affluent client. It's bordering on mass affluent to high net worth and beyond. And those individuals, I think, value service and they value relationship. And that's where, as great as AI is, and it will replace a lot of common tasks, it's not going to replace the advice and the comfort that comes in these tough moments.
Well said on that. And with that, thank you so much for contributing your time today. And encourage our listeners, if you found this interesting and want to listen to other episodes where you get more valuable content about estate administration in Alberta and simplifying that process, gaining knowledge, we encourage you to subscribe to our podcast, listen to our YouTube channel. And if this was helpful, send it to a friend and encourage them to do the same. As we grow the channel and this podcast, it helps us reach more people with valuable information like we had today. So Randy, thanks again for what you've provided. Wish you much success. And maybe we'll look forward in the future to have you back for the next version and talking about the new strides that MyTrusty.ai is making in the field.
Thank you.